Only a couple of hours now, 4 or 5 hours so to go before we start to hear exactly what the Chancellor has in line for us. Chris Philp is MP for Croydon South and a member of the Treasury Select Committee. I'll put to you the same point I've put to a couple of others, Mr Philp. The problem really for Mr Hammond is quite simple. He's got no cash to play with. How accurate is that? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, look, I think there is a shortage of money in government, of course. We've still got a deficit, although we've cleared about two-thirds of the deficit that we inherited. So you're right, money is going to be tight. There is no space for largesse, for huge giveaways. What I think we will see, and what I hope we'll see, is some increased spending on infrastructure to improve the country's productivity, so things like roads, rail, some spending on science, research, development, that sort of thing. And particularly, I'm hoping to get some investment on improving the track infrastructure on Southern Railway, which runs from London to London through my Croydon constituency and which is in dire need of upgrading.
On the eve of this statement, how concerned are you, how concerned should my listeners be by the fact the national debt has soared to a record high and is now growing at a slower rate than the economy for the first time in 14 years?
Well, I think the national debt is a problem. When we came to office 6 years ago, we were running a deficit that was 11% of GDP. So we were spending every year way, way more than we raised in tax. That 11% has now come down to 3%. So we've cleared the deficit quite significantly, but there is still a deficit, and that means that every year, as you say, the debt is growing, not shrinking. And until we get the deficit to zero, or even slightly below zero, we're not actually going to reduce the debt. So there is still, I'm afraid to say, quite a lot of work to do on the deficit reduction side, although a lot of progress has been made.
But the Daily Mail points out that in October, when I say you, I mean the government, you spent more than you earned in tax. Surely that can't go on?
Well, that's right, and that's what a deficit means. A deficit means you spend more than you raise in tax. Actually, the October deficit figure was significantly better than the October figure last year, and in fact it was better than expected, but it was still a deficit. So that's that 3%. We've still got to get down to zero. The target originally, George Osborne's target, was to get it down to zero by 2019-20. Philip Hammond said a month or two ago, we're not going to hit that target because of Brexit. So, he'll announce later on today when that target's going to go back to. My guess would be it'll be about 2022, but we'll have to find out at lunchtime today.
Earlier in the show, I spoke with Jonathan Reynolds, who, of course, as you'll know, is Shadow Economic Secretary to the Treasury. He had this to say.
When I listened to Theresa May, I thought these could be the comments of a Labour Prime Minister in terms of where she set out her aspirations, but none of the follow-through has arrived on that. In fact, often she seems to announce things, or someone in the government announce things, and then the minds change quite a bit. I absolutely agree in terms of everything they've trailed for this statement. We've got to be helping those people who are struggling to get by. But if you're not going to follow through, and in fact, if it's your changes that are going to make those people worse off, surely the obvious place to start is to say, we're not going to go ahead with those changes. We found money for other things. There's a lot of sweeties being, laid out in the papers. If you're not going to change the big things on tax and spending and welfare payments in such a way as to reward those people who go out to work, well, I think you've made the wrong choices.
Mr Reynolds referencing Mrs May's speech when she was on the steps of Number 10 earlier this year. Back to you, Chris Philp.
Well, I don't agree with what he just said. I think we've made a lot of progress helping people who are feeling a bit squeezed. Let me give you a couple of very concrete examples. The income tax threshold is going to be going up to £12,500. That may get accelerated in today's statement. That means you can earn £12,500 of income without paying a single penny of income tax. That's a Conservative innovation, and I think it'll may get accelerated this afternoon. Another one is the minimum wage. We're presiding over the biggest ever increase in the minimum wage. It's already gone up from £6.50 when I was elected a year and a half ago. It's £7.20 an hour today. It's heading up to £9.35 by 2020. That's a bigger increase in the minimum wage than even Ed Miliband was suggesting at the last election. Those are all things that a Conservative government started doing under David Cameron. It's continued doing those things under Theresa May. And those two things I mentioned are directly putting significant amounts of money directly into the pockets of people on low wages. And I'm proud that it's a Conservative government doing that. And I hope the Autumn Statement today will continue it, and I think it will.